This message comes from Instacart. Instacart makes grocery shopping easier. And just because you're not doing the shopping yourself doesn't mean you don't care how it's done. With Instacart Shopper Notes, you can add details about what you want right in the app, like extra crispy rotisserie chicken or lettuce you'd pick yourself. Just leave a note so your shopper can get it right without having to ask. Download the Instacart app and shop today.
Today's story takes us to the Ocean State, where Bravo filmed the first season of The Real Housewives of Rhode Island. We're at a masquerade ball, being thrown by Real Housewife Liz McGraw at the luxurious Newport mansion. Each of the ladies must unmask and reveal a vulnerable truth about themselves. Fellow housewife Alicia Carmody shares that as a child, she and her mother had to move in with Alicia's grandparents.
My life was not easy. From what I remember, my father left us homeless.
Liz, a friend of Alicia's for decades, took issue with that.
You were never homeless.
No, he did. He sold my house. He took my home as a child.
To Liz, this didn't look like the version of homelessness she'd seen up until that point.
He sold my house. We had to move back with my grandmother.
I will never hear you say you were homeless. You were never homeless in your life.
Throughout the season, Liz says she was trying to protect Alicia from misrepresenting her own experience. But Alicia was right. She did experience homelessness.
I was there watching it, the night it came out with everybody.
That's Dr. Molly Richard, assistant professor of the Department of Public Health for the University of Rhode Island's College of Health Sciences. She studies homelessness.
I was thinking, this isn't really about Alicia's story per se, but it's our mental image of homelessness. And I was trying to think, what is Liz picturing when she's hearing that word, when Alicia was saying, I was homeless as a kid.
Beyond the depictions of tents and encampments on TV, there's a whole spectrum of experiences of homelessness that get overlooked. And many of us have seen it in our own lives. But why don't we consider these other situations as homelessness? And what would change if we did? To find out, I'm here with Dr. Margot Kuchel, director at the University of San Francisco's Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative, and Dr. Molly Richard, assistant professor in the Department of Public Health for the University of Rhode Island's College of Health Sciences. Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. And a reminder, if you love It's Been a Minute, which from the sweet comments y'all have been leaving, it sounds like maybe you do, be sure to follow or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. That way you get new episodes the moment they drop. Why would someone like Liz be so ready to say that someone in Alicia's situation was, quote, never homeless in her life? What is the assumption being made about homelessness here? Molly, we'll start with you.
Thanks, yeah. I was not surprised that she had that reaction or someone like her would have that reaction because America's public perception of homelessness is based on who we see outside. For a lot of people, it's folks who are living outside on the streets, people who have maybe serious mental illness or substance use. And so for a lot of folks, they do have this very particular image of homelessness based on visible, unsheltered homelessness.
Yeah, Margot, how did that strike you? What do you think the assumption is underlying there?
I really do think there's this confusion between unsheltered, visible homelessness and the broad experience of homelessness, which encompasses living in a homeless shelter, some of which look quite like apartments, some look quite like warehouses with people stacked up. Also with what we sometimes colloquially call couch surfing, or people who move from place to place to place because they don't have really a place to stay. But that isn't what the public believes is homeless. I'm calling in from the Bay Area, and here, like in most of California, about 2/3 of everyone who experiences homelessness is outdoors or in a car or some other. Mm-hmm. There are lots of Uber drivers sleeping in their cars. There are lots of people who sleep in a tent and then go and work cleaning an office building all night. And even so, the public will say, if we try to talk about their plight, the public will say, well, that's not what I mean when I talk homeless. So somehow people have conflated homelessness with visibly mentally ill, whatever that means, and visible substance use. And that really does not explain most of American homelessness.
That makes me think about something else that Liz later said. She said she was trying to protect Alicia from the consequences or backlash of saying that she was homeless on national TV when she technically wasn't unsheltered. She technically had a roof over her head. What does that say about how our culture defines or recognizes homelessness?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it as it's become like the scarlet H. They've taken those conditions and treated them as if it's a moral failure. They've then pinned that on anyone with the label homeless. So you can understand why people don't want to take that label on. I'm a practicing physician, and every day that I see patients, I will see someone who's sleeping in their car or some other condition that is like meets every federal definition of homelessness. Like everybody in like officially by statute or whatever agrees that they're homeless. And if I bring it up to them, they will say, oh, but I'm not homeless. And I think it's because of this enormous, enormous stigma that has been placed on this experience. And this experience is just all too common, but people really carry it with them and really don't want that label to stick to them.
Molly, I see you nodding.
Yeah. I think Liz was trying to do two things with her reaction, or had a reaction maybe for two reasons. One is she wanted to protect Alicia from that potential backlash of, oh, how could someone who's so rich right now have ever experienced homelessness? This person is out of touch or something. And then also she kind of talked about how she wanted to protect Alicia's family. How could, you have this big, beautiful family. They would have never let you become homeless. And so it was that kind of stigma, again, like Margot was saying, where she was thinking, people who are experiencing homelessness, they don't have social supports or connections. And your family might be kind of embarrassed if you were saying that. What was interesting was Alicia's family in later scenes, she's actually really validated and supported by them. And they said, yeah, that was our experience. And basically, I'm sorry that she invalidated you in that way. And then the other cool reaction was that people who were watching it did not have that, oh my gosh, Alicia's so out of touch response, but hey, yeah, that was my experience too. Or I had that same experience. And yeah, I think it just was cool to see that Liz was wrong and that America was actually like, hey, this is experience that a lot of us have had. And this is something that we should talk about more.
I mean, you both have brought up the fact that this is something that a lot of people have dealt with or are dealing with. I haven't dealt with like housing insecurity in my life, but plenty of people that I love have in a way that matches this exact description. Like they are not unsheltered. They may be with people that love them and care about them, but they don't have their own private space that is theirs and that is secure. This is a really common experience. How do the powers that be, like the government, housing authorities, how do they define homelessness? And how does it compare to the numbers of people experiencing other types of homelessness? Like I want to get, I guess, like a big picture sort of numbers idea of how this technical definition versus the broader definition of homelessness works.
Yeah. Okay. So the other interesting thing about the Real Housewives debate of what is homelessness being a rich, conflicted debate is that we also have that debate in the policy world, in the service provider world. It's a big question of what is homelessness that's been ongoing and persistent for decades. And so the primary definition of homelessness at the federal level comes from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, because they are the primary agency that distributes federal resources for homelessness response. So I'm going to abbreviate now, if that's okay. I'll use
Go for
HUD,
it. Go for it.
The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So their definition of homelessness is unsheltered and sheltered homelessness. So anyone who's lacking a fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence, and they primarily refer to people who are unsheltered, so living outside, in an encampment, on the streets, those kinds of visible homelessness that we've been talking about. And then also people who are sheltered. So sheltered homelessness refers to people who are using any kind of dedicated homeless service or temporary housing program, specifically for people who are experiencing homelessness. And so when people talk about literal homelessness from the federal definition, they really are only including unsheltered and sheltered.
Yeah, I mean, I think Molly's exactly right. I think the Department of Education has a very different, more expansive definition where kids who are doubled up are considered homeless. So then you wind up really confusing the public a lot because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
my school district will count that, say this is a number of kids who are homeless. And then the city will give a number that's like a third of
Right.
that and say this is all the people including the kids who
Mhm.
are homeless, and people are like, what are you talking about? So it is a very like liminal sort of confusing policy wonky kind of thing, which doesn't make sense.
When we've had similar conversations about like the discrepancy between what sort of characteristics fall under a category that might make you eligible for receiving help from the government or from our society.
Mhm.
A question that I always come back around to is like, I don't know, when there's confusion here, or murkiness here, who might benefit from
Mhm.
America's homelessness rate being somewhat unclear in this way or not very
Mm-hmm.
exact?
Yeah. I think how we define homelessness impacts how we measure it, and then it impacts how we respond. And so the question is, how big of a problem do we have? How much do we need to do? The people who benefit when that number is smaller would be, our policymakers or elected officials or anyone who's tasked with allocating the resources to the scale of the issue. And so if there are leaders who, don't want to dedicate the resources that are necessary to address the issue, then they want to narrow that definition so that they can feel like, look, what we're doing is working. We have the adequate resources dedicated to the scale of the issue. That's not to say that there aren't really well-meaning and well-intentioned elected officials there, and they're not in the back room saying, let's pretend that homelessness is smaller than it is, but going from one size of the potential population of people experiencing homelessness to 4 times that or 6 times that, if you really are including all of those who are doubled up, that's a big difference in terms of the scale of response.
Margot, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple things. One is that all throughout this country, the rent is too damn high, right? Like we've increased the
Yeah.
rent and rent and rent and rent and increased the cost of housing and the cost of living. Minimum wage jobs haven't kept up. Things like unemployment, disability payments, no benefits have kept up. There's just been this huge widening of this gap. At the start of the pandemic, I was doing some COVID tracking before we even had COVID tracking, like the first few days. And I started to call around to households where somebody tested positive. And in those households, I was like asking, how many bedrooms do you have? How many people are there? I was taking down names because we were trying to figure out. And this is in San Francisco. I was finding all these households where there were 16 people living with 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom and 1 bathroom. And I think that there is this one line of thinking that if we included all of that in the definition, no one would get anything. Like, no, we would have no chance. And so maybe if you're 16 people in a 1 bedroom, maybe that's better than being on the street. I think most of us could rationally agree, like, that is not a place for a child to grow up. That is a place where conflicts arise through nobody's
Right.
fault. That's a place where nobody's getting sleep. I think there is this fear that the pie is so small and so hard to get and not even barely scratching the surface of what it needs to do, that if we extended, if we quadrupled or quintupled the number of people, which is what we would do, who are really experiencing vastly inadequate housing, well, then we would have no chance. And I think it is, what is the chicken or the egg here?
Yeah. You asked, who benefits from the narrow definition. And one thing I wanted to add to that is taking a second to think about who is potentially most harmed by those narrow definitions, or what are sort of the disparate impacts for certain groups when we do only focus on sheltered or unsheltered homelessness or focus our responses on those who are visible. And so for one, it's definitely families with children. And so when we think about that broader definition of homelessness that the Department of Education counts and estimates each year, we see that 1.5 million children experience homelessness each year. And the last time that they've reported it, so it's the 2023-24 school year, it's the highest number ever on record. So the school definition is showing 11 times as many children experiencing homelessness when we have that expanded definition. Around 75% across the nation or in each community of children experiencing homelessness identified by schools are in a doubled up situation. So when we have our narrow definition of homelessness, yes, it's about scaling resources and all that, but it benefits some people because, we want to attack visible homelessness so that we can show that we made some effort and then get elected. We also see these negative impacts on certain groups when we make those policy decisions.
Coming up after the break.
But the truth is, today, we treat people struggling with mental health and substance use problems as if they were possessed by the devil.
Stick around.
This message comes from BetterHelp. People talk about mental health more openly now, but asking for help can still feel hard. BetterHelp's 2026 State of Stigma report surveyed 2,000 Americans and found that 85% believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society discourages people from doing so. Don't let stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/NPR.
Support for this podcast and the following message come from strawberry.me. Be honest. Are you happy with your job? Are you stuck in a job you've outgrown or never wanted in the first place? Are your reasons for staying really just excuses for not leaving? Let a career coach from strawberry.me help you get unstuck. Discover the benefits of having a dedicated career coach in your corner and get 50% off your first coaching session at strawberry.me/NPR. This message comes from Alloy Health. Menopause doesn't mean stepping back. It means getting the right support to keep moving forward. With the right care, you can stay focused, confident, and fully present. Alloy connects you with menopause-specialized doctors for personalized solutions so you can thrive in midlife. Right now, new customers get $20 off site-wide when you visit myalloy.com and use code NPR.
Hey, it's Latif from Radiolab. Our goal with each episode is to make you think, how did I live this long and not know that? Radiolab, adventures on the edge of what we think we know. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
What are some cultural moments, touchstones, pop culture examples that have informed either the way that either of you thought about homelessness before you got into the work that you do, or that has come up in talking to people?
I'm going to show my age here.
Go for it, Marco.
I was like sentient thinking, at least a teenager, when the first part of the modern sort of homelessness started, which is really in the early 80s.
Well, even when you say modern homelessness, I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah. It's like really when there was a shift in what homelessness meant. There's always been people without homes in this country, but there was this real shift in both the proportion of people and the experience in the early 80s and the sort of pop culture. Before that, there was this idea of like hobos or
Right.
other sort of urban dwellers, often like older white guys, as the image. And then it really shifted with a whole bunch of shifts in the world in the early 80s. And I remember as like a pop culture moment, all the stars would like line up on a TV show and sing songs to raise money to end this crisis. And we had all of these like emergency shelters because everyone thought it was like a 1-year thing. And that was in the, early to mid 80s. And yet it became more and more and more entrenched in our society. So then it was like all the churches and all the other like religious institutions would like host people for a night, and people would literally go on a bus from one place to another place. And it was thought of as this like moment in time. And like all these like pop stars would sing about it on like almost like a telethon like thing.
Hi, I'm Oprah Winfrey. I need your help. On Sunday, May 25th, I need you to hold someone's hand. It can be anyone you want.
This is like new, this is real news to me, but yeah, I guess like the public sort of shock and surprise at this kind of street homelessness or visible homelessness that you're talking about, and that feels so foreign to me compared to sort of how
we respond now. Now it's like, it feels like it's like a Fox News feature, right? To come to San Francisco and take images of people really, really having the worst moments of their lives. And then just like saturate TikTok and, YouTube and everything with these images. And this is homelessness. and these are bad people who did this bad thing. And it sort of lets everyone off the hook about these deep, deep structural issues that really cause this and maintain this crisis.
Wow. I'm sorry. You're kind of blowing my mind. Even just thinking about like telethons and things like that people would be that taken aback at that sort of thing, that would be a response. That is wow. Molly, what about you? I mean, what kind of informed your ideas about homelessness, or even like people that you've worked with or that you've spoken to, like what has informed them?
So much has gone into informing that, and I think just being really curious and understanding all the varied experiences. But I really want to like pick up on what Margot was saying just now, because I think what's really interesting is thinking about how during that time, homelessness went from a more narrow definition, like you were saying, right? Mm-hmm. For, being a disaffiliated single adult on Skid Row who's not from this town, to, okay, now let's reconceptualize it to it's actually all these, it includes families, people of color, working people. We're actually seeing it in a different way now. And so it actually gives me a little hope too, that we can like do that again a little bit, because we did change what homelessness meant to people, and it has changed over the last, 50 years. And so I would say that some of the things that I think in my life that also have shifted it to being like, oh, I understand it as a spectrum of housing insecurity and instability. So people who are not nerdy about homelessness policy and services like me, they've seen like the Florida Project.
You're going to be late again. You got to let me know.
It was due yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. It was due yesterday.
What else? Why you gotta count it like I'm broke?
Good girl. You got your rent. Let me count it. Get out of here.
Bye.
Bye.
I don't know if you're familiar with that film. It's, family living in a motel. So I'll have friends talk to me about that. Mm-hmm. And then just social media and people actually sharing their own experiences and points and perspectives.
I'm currently homeless and sleeping in my car. I'm going to give y'all 5 things that work for me. And I know it's going to work for you too.
I'm homeless at the Salvation Army. This is what they're feeding us for lunch. First, I got to add my salt and pepper.
Spent a homeless morning with me as a 28-year-old living in a campsite with my friend and our 2 dogs.
People are actually seeing the accounts, first person, of people who are experiencing homelessness in varied ways that they never saw before. But it's interesting is I don't think our policymakers and systems have caught up to that. Like the public is ready to have a conversation about how housing insecurity and homelessness is a spectrum, and it's really, really hard to find and afford housing. And I think policymakers are now kind of tasked with deciding how they want to respond, if they want to address situations like doubling up and couch surfing.
And I think this may be like a generational thing too, and we might see changes like I don't know if it's good news or bad news, but it's sort of interesting / exciting to see some young Congress people, let's say, some of the really young Congress people share their own lived experience of having been homeless, right? Yeah. And so there's several who talk about it. We'd have a big research center that looks at homelessness. And so we hire people and we ask them sort of, questions about like what got them interested in this. How many young people, young people talk about their own experience? It's shocking, and it's like, well, when I was in college, when I was 17, when I was 24, I lived in my car, I lived in a garage, I went from house to house. It's really so common.
Yeah. But fears and ideas about homelessness, though, have long been a major political cudgel, especially lately. I mean, even just considering like the LA mayoral primary earlier this year. I mean, street homelessness, it's a big visible part of LA living. Spencer Pratt, okay, for those who do not remember or know, he is best known for being a villain on a 20-year-old reality TV show. That is what Spencer Pratt is best known for, okay? He has no political experience whatsoever, but he was able to garner a lot of support in the primary because he ran on the idea of making this visible homelessness invisible. I mean, I think one of his solutions included moving people on the streets of Los Angeles, out of LA and into Seattle, for example. I mean, that's not a real or really ethical solution, but it sounded good to a sizable group of people. It sounded good enough to them that they voted for him, right? I wonder, why is this response to or characterization of homelessness so politically seductive for some voters?
People like to blame people for their own problems because it's like the American way. If you pull yourself up from your bootstraps, if you don't do it, it's your fault. And, in this country, we still treat mental health and substance use problems like you're possessed by the devil. And I always say to people, like, if you go back to Middle Ages, people thought people with epilepsy were possessed by the devil. And when I say that in rooms, people sort of giggle and laugh because they're like, that's ridiculous. But the truth is today, we treat people struggling with mental health and substance use problems as if they were possessed by the devil. The other thing is lots of people struggle with mental health and substance use problems, right? Most of those people are housed.
There are lots of people who have lots of money and plenty of security and still deal with these things. They're very difficult.
Thank you.
These are things that affect every single population, but the way that it manifests looks different depending on your circumstances.
And I have this view that one of the reasons people are so upset by this and so angry at people experiencing homelessness is actually because perhaps they have experience with a loved one who suffered and they feel how difficult it is. These problems interfere with social functioning. They're really painful for family members. They're really painful problems. And so there's part of it that I think is like people are like putting their own experience without putting the broader framework of what it would take to end it. Or if you have lots and lots of money and lots of resources, you can deal with it quietly. Where we always say people who are unsheltered are living their private lives in public. They're living it in public. They're having that suffering in public and everyone can see.
And that makes some people, I imagine, uncomfortable. And so if someone comes through and says, hey, I can make this problem disappear for you, then that might sound appealing.
It's a hard thing to say to the public. What we really need is electeds who don't have to run for election every 4 years, who can say the truth, which is that it's taken us 40 years and deep-seated structural problems in this country to get us into this deep of a mess. And we're not going to end it tomorrow. But there is a way forward. We can do what they've done for the veterans. We can build the housing. We can subsidize the housing. We can provide the services that everyone needs to thrive. And trust me, if we do that, it will be a win for everyone. But that is not how politics works these days. There are people like doing a gotcha and like trying to ramp up the hatred of people who, it's like kicking people when they're down. How much more down could you be than struggling with an uncontrolled health problem, living your life outside?
Margot, Molly, thank you both so much. You took this moment from the Real Housewives of Rhode Island, honestly, and expanded it out into a really comprehensive explanation of why we are where we are as a society with regard to our attitudes and policy approach with homelessness. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us and for hosting this conversation.
Thanks for having us.
That was Dr. Margot Kuchel, director at the UCSF Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative, and Dr. Molly Richard, assistant professor in the Department of Public Health for the University of Rhode Island's College of Health Sciences. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Antonio Rose.
This episode was edited by
Nina Patak.
Our supervising producer is
Cher Vincent.
Our executive producer is
Barton Girdwood.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Jerry. Are you tired of your car insurance rate going up, even with a clean driving record? That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/NPR today. This message comes from Instacart. Instacart knows not all bananas are created equal. Some want them green, some ripe, some want them ready right now. With Instacart's Preference Picker, available at most retailers, you can choose preferences like avocado ripeness or deli thickness before your shopper starts. So instead of hoping for the best, you get groceries picked the way you would pick them. Download the app and get bananas just how you like with Instacart.